But primary purpose is spiritual awakening, to be awakened, an awakened human being. And this is what an awakened human being is. What is an awakened human? They know, at first hand, their essential beingness in any situation, in any moment. This is, so you may not be able to immediately, you will make a difference whether you become a spiritual teacher or not in one way or another, formal or non-formal. Who knows, you may. But the realization when it came to me was not immediately accompanied by an ability to explain anything. I didn't even understand it. I couldn't have explained anything. All I could have said was I was anxious. I've been anxious and fearful and stressed and depressed human being for years, and suddenly I'm peaceful. Why? Don't know. I didn't understand it. So understanding is not the main thing, conceptual understanding. It may come, and there have been and there are realized humans who never arrive at an understanding. There are saints in India who just sit there all day long, never say anything, but you can just feel that they have that deep connectedness with being, and all they do is they look at you. And you can sense there's not just a person looking at me, there is consciousness looking. The unconditioned consciousness is looking through that form. And they're happy just sitting there. And usually in India they are recognized, and so people come, even if they don't say a word, people are still happy sitting with them and being looked at. But in the West, it doesn't seem to work very well. So it's the Course in Miracles, of course, has a nice a quote from the Course in Miracles: "Your understanding is not a powerful contribution to the truth." But using concepts and words as pointers can be very helpful, especially in the West. But even in India, it's nowadays appreciated. So to use them as pointers, yes, not as final, not as any kind of truth. All the words that we use here, when I say, what it's like to be you, or when we say, who am I? Yes, we're using words, we're using thoughts, but they are pointing beyond themselves to beyond concepts. So you use concepts, but in order to step beyond concepts. And that perhaps the Buddha he described it as the raft. You use a raft to cross a river. And then when you've crossed the river, you don't carry the raft around with you anymore. So it is, once you have even had a glimpse of it, you can choose to, another way of saying it is, it has chosen you, but let's put that aside. There are many different perspectives, one can look at it from many different perspectives. Once you've had a glimpse, you can then invite it into your life, so to speak, and so that you begin, and then another word, we have to use it in quotation marks, you then begin to practice that embodying that presence in addition to dealing with your daily life. And so you start with simple things, and then you will be it will be an amazing revelation when suddenly you find yourself in a situation that otherwise, or in the past, would have been a conflict situation and you feel in the background of yourself, you can feel a certain spacious presence, even while you're talking and listening to the others. That also means there is a rootedness there in being, it's another way of putting it, that is extremely, that removes fear from your life. Nothing else will really remove the fear that is your lot when to you the surface reality of the senses is the only reality there is. You have to live in fear, even if it's not, you don't actually, it may be just hidden underneath the veneer of confidence, but it's there. It may be hidden underneath anger, but it's there. So when you live, to come back very briefly to the analogy of the sphere, the ball, and we are all faces facing outward. Oh, by the way, this analogy was already used 2,000 years ago by Plotinus, the philosopher. He said we are all like faces looking outward, and people haven't realized the depths of yourself. So when you're living on the surface, of course you live in fear. And it's only by going deeper that sensing your essential beingness, then you are rooted, so to speak, you are rooted in being, you are it. Language always creates duality, but that's just how it is. So you are rooted in that being, and then fear is no longer in your life. And fear in its many forms, anxiety, worry, and all those things, fear, so much fear. Freedom from fear is humans are longing for that, and that's the only way. It can be, I'm not saying my way is the only way, but Jesus, another saying by Jesus, I am the way. You might remember that phrase. I am the way and the life and the truth. If you added one little word, then it would make more sense, and perhaps this is how he used it. I am is the way and the life and the truth of who you are. It's through the I am that God is realized, that which is the greater, the vastness with which you are connected in that I am. So these are all profound statements that he made, but been misunderstood, misinterpreted. I am is the way. That's the end of fear, that is then experienced as peace, an alive peace. It came to me spontaneously many years ago, and the mind slowed down considerably, and that is another thing that you will notice as you connect with that. Rather than trying to slow down your mind, give attention to the feeling of yourself, and then the mind will slow down by itself. It calms down. Because the mind, the hyperactivity of the human mind, which is a disease that humanity is suffering from and has suffered from for thousands of years, the hyperactivity of the mind can't stop thinking. I must think about this. The voice that for many people is a torturer in their head that never stops, and often aggressive, towards themselves or towards others, and critical continuously, sometimes more towards yourself or towards others, and complaining a lot of the time about your life and your situation and other people and what they're doing, and it goes on and on, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and you've become so identified with it, even the question, I want to get rid of my mind, doesn't arise because you have become your mind. And that's a dreadful fate. So the hyperactivity of the human mind is because the mind has become a substitute sense of identity. Rather than having your identity in being, the beingness of you, your identity is in thought. You derive yourself from the activity of thinking.
The questioner already says there's a lot of fear involved there, there's a lot of worry involved there that creates the suffering. And that is something that you can tackle. And that is something that needs a more intense presence than an ordinary situation and an ordinary kind of anxiety that many people live with, even if there's nothing in particular that they're anxious about. I believe in psychology it's sometimes called free-floating anxiety. Free-floating anxiety. You're anxious, you don't know why, or you think you know why, but one thing can easily be exchanged for another. If the thing you're anxious about today suddenly gets resolved, tomorrow you'll be anxious about something else. Free-floating anxiety always finds a reason for being anxious, and it's part of the egoic mind. But sometimes there is a reason to be anxious. There is a justified reason to be anxious, in the case of this questioner also. And there, it requires intense presence to see, is it possible for me to let go of the worry, which is the mind working in you, excessive thinking, imagining something that might happen to me, and the imagination of something and thinking yourself into situations where this has already happened, which you cannot deal with because they are not here now, and this is why it cannot be solved because it's an imagined situation. If you were experiencing it here now, it would probably be easier to deal with it than to deal with it as an imagination, an imaginary situation in your mind. So it requires intense presence to step out of that, and that the motivation and the strength to step out of that useless thinking that creates fear is provided by the fear itself. Because the fear itself is so unpleasant to live with that a moment comes perhaps when you say, I can't stand this anymore. I don't want to live with this constant fear and this constant anxiety, even though it might be justified. I don't want this anymore, because that is suffering in the way in which we use the word. And that can dissolve, but you need to have the motivation. You want to be free of it. You can't take it anymore. And then, if you truly are fed up with suffering on that level, that provides the motivation for stepping out into intense presence. And it is intense presence that you need when you are in a situation that, like illness, that could be critical or could lead to a critical condition or is already critical, or whatever else it may be. It could be another person close to you, a child, something is going wrong there, physical or otherwise, or somebody close to you, or you lost all your money and wherever in some deal, and then you know, okay, this is the last month that I can pay the mortgage, Where am I going to live? What's going to happen to me? Am I going to be homeless? You wake up in the middle of the night seeing yourself as homeless, awful, and then all the other things that are happening to you or could happen to your family if you have a family. You see all these dreadful things happening to you, and intense fear arises. You're nobody anymore, nobody wants to see you anymore because you have lost your job and your social function. And some people can't live with that. The people commit suicide when they lose their social function, or some scandal happens and everybody thinks, before they thought you were great and now they think you're awful. Some scandal to you, in your vicinity. And it's not uncommon for people to commit suicide. But that is potentially an incredible opportunity for stepping out of the mind, because it is the mind that's creating that. So allow the situation such as an illness to force you almost into intense presence, where you don't leave the present moment. And it manifests as this realization that you want to dedicate your life to awakening and that everything else is secondary. Not that you neglect your external affairs, but you realize that in every situation, the primary factor is the state of consciousness that you bring to the situation that determines how the situation unfolds, that determines whether you're reactive or non-reactive. It determines your responses. Everything flows from your state of consciousness. So the dedication is, the primary dedication is that the realization that my purpose in life, my primary purpose is awakening. My primary purpose is to live consciously, to be a bringer of consciousness into this world. But when you say my primary purpose is awakening, don't put awakening into the future as a future goal, because that is not helpful. Awakening isn't a future goal. The awakening, the portal into awakening opens up in the present moment, if you take your attention more deeply into the present moment. So it's easy to forget what the primary purpose of your life is. You might understand what I'm talking about, and there may be an inner voice that says, yes, I know that this is true, and yet when situations arise in your daily life, you forget it. You react. You don't respond consciously. The ego comes back. You react, and many people tell me they find themselves continuously reverting back to reactivity and to worry and anxiety and so on. So although you may realize now, here and now, what the primary purpose of your life is, you may forget it the moment the phone rings and you get a challenging message. And so this is to do with integrating the awakened state into your daily life, the most important thing there is. So the School of Awakening is designed to help you with that, so that you learn how to not lose presence when you're being challenged, for example, so that you can learn to live in the two dimensions. You live in this world and you are rooted in being or presence. This is the dance of life between the world of form and the world of spirit or the unmanifested, and you, of course, your root is in the in the dimension of being, in the dimension of the unmanifested, the deep I, as I call it. But that the world will try to pull you continuously out of that deep I back into the surface I, which is the historical person. So practice can be very helpful, and probably the School of Awakening will help quite a few people in this essential task of integrating the awakening consciousness into their daily life. That is vital. And learning that you don't need to run away from challenges, or to find that you believe that you need a more conducive environment for sustaining and integrating spiritual awakening, but realizing that whatever it is that makes up your daily life can become part of your spiritual practice. And really that's what you need to learn. The challenges that arise in daily life, all those things become an essential part of your spiritual practice. Instead of demanding that life should give you space and opportunity to practice undisturbed. But if you practice undisturbed, it's unlikely that you will go very deep. You might have deep meditations, but the moment you go back into your life, you'll be pulled out again. If you go to an ashram for a year, not that there's anything wrong, for some people it might be a good thing, but generally speaking, if you go to an ashram for a year and meditate and the food is brought to you, you don't have to do anything. You might even get lovely massages and lovely fresh food. You might go quite deep in meditation, but it will not be really deep because it has never been exposed to the winds and the storms of everyday life. You will be like a greenhouse or hothouse plant that grew very quickly, but the moment you take it out of the greenhouse into the open, it can't stand the assault by the elements and it withers. So you don't want to be like that. So use what you have. That's part of the teaching of the School of Awakening. The dance between being and doing, between the unmanifested and the manifested, between the deep I and the surface I. So that's to achieve mastery of this is really the purpose of your life. The mother bird is taking the little chick and going, and then it will, oh no, you can't fly like that, you have to do this.
I guess just to go along with questions about boys, my daughter's 17 years old. There are times when, and many times recently, when she does not want to follow my direction, how do I stay present when she's doing, pulling?
So she's 17.
She's 17.
So you've only got a few more months of control over her, and then you have to let go.
Well, she's been at this for a while.
So then the shift then as your children grow older, of course, the younger they are, the more you need to, in some cases, control what they do, because they might do something to hurt themselves, like don't play with fire, don't walk on a high wall because you might fall off. So those things, and then gradually the parent needs to learn to allow a bit more, always a bit more freedom and a bit more, just give guidance rather than control. Some parents find it hard to shift from exerting control as they grow older and giving guidance. And as teenagers especially, they resent, as you know and everybody knows, they resent being told what to do because they're beginning to be independent adults.
Well, she knows everything.
Yes, of course. Yes. So there's as much learning for you as there is for her in this situation. For you, it's to do with continuing to give guidance without giving the impression that you're trying to control what she does.
No.
And if guidance is not received, no matter whether it's given but it's not received, then you need to accept that, especially as soon she will be reaching 18. Then and then compassion comes in. You continue to help her as much as you can, offer help or guidance, realizing that she now has she is autonomous now and will decide what to do on her own, and she will make mistakes, hopefully, because if she doesn't, she's not going to grow. She will make mistakes, and you may see it, and she won't. And ultimately, they're not really mistakes, because they're all part of one's growth process and becoming eventually conscious. Often mistakes, if they are leading to suffering, and then can lead to awakening. And then retrospectively, they're not mistakes. If a mistake leads to awakening, it's not a mistake. Eventually, so it's a letting go internally, compassionate letting go, like think of the image of a nest and the mother bird is taking the little chick and going, and then it'll, oh no, you can't fly like that, you have to do this. But birds have learned to fly for 1 million years and more without the mother bird telling them what to do. They'll learn, so it's trusting in the movement of life and realizing how that so-called mistakes are an important part of our growth. And that's, we had somebody else before, we talked about allowing them to do that. So it's think of the image, and that will help you to be, your associated question was to do with patience or presence. This will help you, the bird, you let the bird fly off. And the flight at first may not be smooth, and they may have a hard landing. And then you just watch, and you know that's fine. Do as much as you can. Patience is not quite the same as presence. In presence, the whole idea or concept of patience disappears. When you're present and somebody says, oh, you're so patient, you say, patient? I didn't know I was patient. Patient is something that you're trying to do. You really. I'm trying to be patient here. Here is the key word. I'm trying to be patient here. So the patience is something you're kind of holding back. I'm very patient with you. But in presence, really, you're not thinking of yourself as patient at all. It doesn't come into it really anymore at all. You're just present with what is. And as I said, if somebody called you patient, you'd say, what does that mean? I'm not patient at all. It's like forgiveness also. In presence, forgiveness happens naturally. And so you don't need to make a big deal and say, I'm trying to forgive that person. I had, again, in my life, I had for many years resentment towards my father until I finally woke up. And then the resentment disappeared and my relationship with him changed completely. There was suddenly love. And for until the age of 29, I had enormous amount of resentment. I didn't realize, of course, that he did what he did because of his programming. He had an enormous amount of anger in him that comes from his childhood. And again, I could explain why, but it's not necessary. It comes from his childhood and the way in which he interpreted his childhood. What his mother did to him, not actually, rather how he interpreted her motivation. He was the seventh child, the youngest, and then his father died when he was only 14. And then the family didn't have enough money to have all the children at school, at high school. So two of his sisters were kept at school and he was taken out of school because he didn't have enough money. And he had to become an apprentice in some store, not supermarket, they didn't have supermarkets then, but some store where he had to make deliveries to big houses. And that enormous anger started to come up in him during all that time, what my mother did to me, what they did to me. And that never really left him. So living with him, the anger was usually not directed to me, but was directed to my mother always. And living there was like living with an unexploded bomb. It could go off at any moment. Whenever he was there, it was like a powder keg. Any moment it could go off. One wrong word by my mum, and my mum was very good at saying the wrong word.
Of course.
That was he couldn't help that. And as I then disidentified from that, in his later years, there was a considerable degree of awareness coming in. Some remnants of that anger remained, but far less than before. And he read The Power of Now a few years before he died, and it was meaningful to him. And there was quite a bit, in some areas of his life, he was virtually enlightened, and in other areas, there were still big pockets of unconsciousness. But compared to what he was before, there was an enormous shift. And it has, I'm sure, something to do with the shift that happened in me towards him. So there was no longer anything to forgive. That's the beauty of it. And it was all his ego was huge. So I learned about ego before I even knew the word ego. Throughout all my childhood, I learned about how the ego behaves and what it does through observation without knowing that was ego. But I saw the dysfunction, normal dysfunction in relationships. It's all fine. Trust, compassion, letting go, and then life will do the rest.
Well, thank you very much.
So as you can guess, I'm in the summer, the southern hemisphere. We just finished our retreat here on the Sunshine Coast of Australia. It's very warm, but a cooling breeze coming from the ocean. So let's settle into the present moment. Access the stillness that's already within you, even though you might not have realized it. Even with people who have the most turbulent and chaotic minds, there is stillness underneath it. And to find that, it is vital to find that stillness within, because otherwise you are at the mercy of your mind and you're lost in that continuous noise. So here, it's helpful for you to, as I'm sure you know already, to become aware of the silent spaces between the words. Rather than just pay attention to the words. In fact, be more interested, so to speak, in the silent spaces than the words. The silent space on the external level is when I stop speaking, so the sound is no longer produced. There's an absence of sound. And that's what we call silence. Maybe not complete silence here, because there are some background noises, so perhaps you can hear birds and other noise. But when I don't speak, there's the absence of noise, except for the birds. And when you're aware that there is an absence of noise, that there is a silence, which is an external thing, simultaneously something happens inside you. And that's why it is so wonderful to be aware of external silence. You may know this already, but whether you've heard this before or not doesn't matter. The important thing is to realize it now. So, when you pay attention to silence, What is it you pay attention to? Nothing in particular. There is no content to silence. When I speak, the words, the sounds are the content. When I stop speaking, there's no content. And if you're new to this, you might even ask, what is it that I pay attention to when I pay attention to silence? And the answer is nothing, really. Well, then the question arises, how can I pay attention to nothing? Well, you pay attention to that space of no content. And then something happens inside you simultaneously. You might notice that when you pay attention to just the fact that there is a silence, you can do it when you're alone in a room. You can do it in the middle of the night. You can do it out in nature. You can do it in a church, preferably when it's empty, or a temple. Anywhere where there is some silence, you become aware of it. Don't overlook the silence and don't always look for the noise. So what happens inside you when you become aware of that absence of noise? Thinking subsides. And you become still inside. The moment you become aware of silence and pay attention to silence, you become still inside. The ceaseless stream of thinking subsides, and what's left is only that alert space. You may not be able to sustain it for very long by yourself. It doesn't matter as long as it's there. If it's only for a few seconds, it's good enough to start with. And here, perhaps you're able to sustain it, perhaps during the entire duration of our meditation. In other words, let go of thinking without falling asleep, and just be here, present, as a presence, conscious presence. Now the words I speak are so simple that you can't really think about them because there's nothing to figure out. So to understand what I'm saying, you don't need to add some more thought to it. So the best way of being here with me is to embrace the state of thoughtless awareness. No need to think. And you haven't disappeared. The essence of who you are is not only still here, the essence of who you are has emerged more fully now. when you are still. To enter that meditative state of consciousness, because that's what it is all about. Meditation is about a shift in consciousness away from concern with doing and thinking and becoming aware, really directly aware of the present moment. And that's perhaps the easiest and most accessible starting point for most people to enter the state of presence, which is the aim of meditation, is to get you into that state of absolute presence in this moment. And that's being, becoming aware of being. Most people are always engaged in doing. That includes thinking continuously. And a lot of the thinking that people do is not very uplifting. A lot of the thinking that happens compulsively creates negative feelings. And a lot of the thinking is actually harmful and dysfunctional. It doesn't serve any useful purpose, but you just can't stop it. Well, you think you can't, but you can. And that's, of course, what meditation is about. To realize there is in you a deeper dimension of consciousness, deeper or higher you could call it, depending from where you look at it, deeper or higher than thinking. And that is the state of presence in the now. So it's an amazing realization for most people that they can actually easily access that state of presence by bringing their attention into the present moment, like now. So I'm although I'm talking, my aim is to talk you, so to speak, into that state of meditation. And it helps if, while I talk, you can become conscious or aware of the small gaps between words as I talk. So you're just aware not only of the words, of course you hear the words, you take them in, but you're also aware that there are little spaces between the words. You just acknowledge that. These are little meditative gaps, so to speak. And in order to be really aware of the meditative gaps, you can't be thinking. You're just aware of that space. there is, what does that mean, aware? There is a presence in that awareness. You know, in that awareness, like now, you know that you are here as a conscious presence without any thought telling you that. In other words, you become aware of yourself not as a person, because to be a person you need to be thinking about you and your life and your problems and so on. But there's a deeper dimension in you, deeper than the person. And this is what we are here to access. So you become aware that really on the surface of your life there is the person with a past and a future and all the thinking and the emotions that keep the person going, of course. And so you're happy one day, unhappy the next. Happy one day, unhappy. The fluctuations of the person, it's quite normal. And the person is always concerned with doing and thinking and the next thing, or the past, the future. The past is never really present. When you become present, like now, you realize that there is a deeper part in you. There is a deeper dimension to who you are, where you are more than a person, where you are a presence, a conscious presence. The question is, can you sense, feel, or be aware of yourself at this moment as a conscious presence, without which there couldn't even be a person? So it's almost like saying the person is the surface of the ocean, or the ripples or the waves on the surface of the ocean. But you are not just the ripples or waves on the surface of the ocean. You are the ocean. So there's a deeper presence in you. And to access that, and to sense that in yourself, to sense yourself as the presence, a presence, that is what liberates you from being completely trapped and limited in an exclusively personal identity. In other words, there is more to you than meets the eye. You are deeper than you ever knew by thinking about yourself. And it's not difficult to access that dimension. in yourself. Can one describe it? Well, one can give a few pointers. Let's see if that makes sense. The pointers I'm giving you now, let's see if they make sense in your own experience at this moment. Sensing yourself as a presence. There is a peacefulness there. That is really the essence of what is sometimes called inner peace. The person, the surface of the ocean, the waves and the ripples of the ocean, cannot be at peace for long. It fluctuates. Occasionally, if things happen to go well, yeah, I'm happy. It never lasts for very long. And then the storm comes and big waves come, or little irritated waves, whatever. And you're unhappy. But there's a deeper. If let's say you are a ripple on the surface of the ocean with a name and a date of birth and a past and a future and problems, and suddenly the ripple realizes there's more to me, and realizes, oh, I'm actually much deeper and vaster. I'm the ocean, manifesting as the ripple. And so you are the universe, or the consciousness that underlies the sense-perceived universe, manifesting temporarily as a person. You are the universe becoming conscious of itself at this moment in your life as a person. You are not separate from the totality of the universe. You are the universe. The universe has, or the consciousness that underlies the universe has given form to who you are temporarily in order to experience itself as a person. It's an amazing thing. And the universe here is in the process of becoming more conscious. That's what the entire evolution of the universe is about. It's consciousness. So your life is part of the evolutionary impulse towards greater consciousness. And if your life is not primarily about greater consciousness, which actually you can build into whatever you do, it doesn't mean you stop doing and just say, all I'm interested in consciousness. No, it needs to flow into what you do. If your life purpose is not aligned with the evolving consciousness of the universe, then what is the point of it all? And then sooner or later you get very frustrated and things become pointless. So you are here to become more conscious, because that's what the universe has put you here for. Instead of universe, you can use other terms if you're more comfortable with them. The universal intelligence, God. So, right now, in addition to being a person, which right now is not important, it becomes important again when we finish our meditation, I'm sure. But right now, something else is more important, and that's realizing yourself as the presence. Coming into the present moment and feeling, just being aware right now that you are conscious. If you were not conscious, you wouldn't be able to hear, see, perceive anything. The fact that you can perceive things, the fact that you can think, the fact that you can have emotions, all implies that you are conscious. The meditative state is becoming aware directly of that consciousness. Sometimes the word that is used also is stillness. Right now, you become still. You become aware of just being, of being that presence. And that feels energizing. You don't go to sleep. You're actually alert and still at the same time. And now you access an intelligence that is deeper than the thinking mind by entering that state of alert presence. And then when you think again, you are connected with the source of all intelligence, with creativity. You become empowered. Your thinking and your doing and your actions are then aligned with the deeper purpose of the universe, not just little egoic desires. So all this is so terribly important. Aligning your life with that presence. So you need to, during your normal day, I'll give you a few hints about how to invite that presence into your life, which by invite I mean direct your attention to it because it's always there. That really is what supports you in life, and if you can be aware of that, fear, anxiety happen less and less in your life because you can feel supported by that vast presence, which is not just it's not your own presence, it is the universal presence of consciousness. You connect with that. You are that. So on a normal day, you go to work or whatever you do, as much as you can, become aware of just brief moments of yourself as the presence, in addition to being a person. So one of the things I recommend is it sounds almost too simple, but from time to time, look at the sky for a few seconds. You look up. It doesn't matter whether it's blue or cloudy. Today here it's the early afternoon, happens to be a sunny day. Look at the sky for a moment. You're looking but not thinking. You could do that with anything, but sky is easier because there's this vast expanse that has some correlation with the presence or stillness within you. So you look, and for a moment there's the sky, and you can sense yourself as the presence that is perceiving, and you're not thinking. So there's a brief moment of not thinking, but not going to sleep. Alertness without thinking, that's the key. To bring that into your life more often. And don't believe when your mind tells you that you need to think and think and think all the time. Bring in gaps of just alert presence. That's the being. The rest is the doing. The two there needs to be a balance in your life between being and doing, otherwise you go mad. A civilization that completely loses touch with the being dimension is going to self-destruct.
What we might call a shallow person is a person who is totally trapped only in the mind activity, the knowledge accumulated by the mind, and perceives everything through thoughts. In other words, you walk around your life like the tourist who rents this little device and tells them comments about what they are perceiving continuously. That's fine. Sometimes it may be necessary, but imagine going through life not being able to get rid of that device. You can't take it off anymore. It keeps commenting. So wherever you go in the street, it says, okay, look at that person there. And you have, and the thing even tells you whether you like it or not. This is, I like that. Oh, I don't like that. Oh, I wish I had an answer on whatever. And of course, this is how most people live, because they're so identified with the involuntary mind activity, the little voice in the head. They don't even know it. They think they are the voice. And to live through the voice then makes your life quite shallow, because whatever you experience lacks depth. You experience it through a concept. Every thought is conceptual. So when let's say you are in the street, a man or woman comes towards you, and your mind immediately has to say something about whether you like or don't like, or would like to do something with this person, whatever it may be, or have some kind of reference point, or commenting on the way they look, weird or strange or nice, or I'd like to, whatever. Is there another way of perceiving this human being? Yes. To perceive the human in the same way, what I said about the cathedral, if that resonates with you, if you have had a glimpse of that experience, or perhaps more than a glimpse, then you know the difference between stepping into a place
and going. No comment. Well, perhaps the mind says, oh, this is so beautiful, and then there's this stillness again. So there is a still space through which you perceive instead of concepts through which you perceive. And suddenly there's a depth. Not only you feel another dimension is suddenly present, not only outside of you, another dimension that the tourist who is totally dependent on either the mechanical guide or the human guide is not aware of that. The tourist who only listens to the commentary misses the true aliveness, the sacredness, and the depth of that place. And so, also within, you are trapped in the head. There's no depth then to you as a human being, where there's something that responds to life, and something deeper than the commentary in your head. And so many people these days are trapped then with this guide, the tourist guide they can't get rid of. And it's called your mind. And so, not that the mind is not a useful tool, and even in the cathedral, it adds a little bit to it if you know something about it. And I would say that's the second stage, to come back just for a moment to this cathedral analogy, one could almost say. You come back to that. Of course, ideally, and what I do that occasionally, but sometimes we don't have enough time because when we travel, first I love to experience the place without knowing anything and truly experience it, the depth of it. And then perhaps go back to the hotel room and then look at the guidebook and then learn a few facts about it. Can be quite helpful. And then go back the next day, look at it again, and then you have a balance between knowing things about it and still being able to experience it. So in other words, you have then some information in your head. I read about that. It was built by such and such, then and then, whatever. And then again, you have the spaciousness where you perceive. And then you look at something else and there's a statue of the saint so-and-so, and some knowledge about it that you might have overlooked, a little detail. You can actually see a tear coming out of his eye or whatever. Oh yeah, there's the tear. He seems to be crying. Don't know why, but it seems to. And then again, you can take it in without the commentary. So that's a little, you can experiment with that. And so I'm using that almost as just an analogy for the whole of your life. Most people are stuck with the tourist guide in the head. It comments continuously of what's going on in your life and evaluates and interprets and defines in words everything that you perceive. And so, in whatever way it is defined or interpreted depends on your particular conditioning, on the way you were brought up, what you were taught by the surrounding culture, and so on. So the kind of tourist guide you have depends on your past. And so it's really your past talking to you continuously, certain forms of conditioning from your culture, your education, your family background, what you have read. Your fears and ambitions are also expressed there as thought structures. They become thoughts, what you would like, want, what you fear. What if that happens? Oh my God, this could go wrong. What if? Of course, so it becomes very problematic because the voice doesn't stop talking. Except occasional moments when you suddenly feel a heightened sense of aliveness. Perhaps you're out in nature and you're looking up at a tree or a forest or And for a moment you say, oh. And then after a few seconds the mind says, that's beautiful. But for about 10 seconds or 20 seconds the mind wasn't saying anything. And that's the reason why that you can know that it's beautiful. Beautiful is not, the mind cannot really, the mind is concepts. There's no beauty really in that. If something from within you responds to beauty, in nature, for a moment there must have been a space where the tourist guide in the head stopped talking. And in that space, there's a deeper experiencing of whatever is there. There's a depth to your experience. What does that mean? It means, yes, what you see is the same, but the state of consciousness through which you see it has deepened. A space has opened up inside you through which the perception happens. And that's the depth. So you could say, when you look at something, and for a moment you're not interpreting what you see, there's just the seeing, and you may be aware of the background to what you see, which cannot be defined, but there's a stillness inside while you perceive. This is what I meant when I talked about entering a cathedral without the knowledge in your head. So suddenly the mind has become still and the perception happens. So you have two dimensions. You have a stillness in the background, and whatever is going on outside is there. The stillness is the depth that changes your perceptions. Then you see that the tree also has a depth to it and an aliveness and a sacredness that you didn't know before when you were conceptualizing the tree and said, oh, that's a such and such a tree, and whatever knowledge you have, or this tree is in my grandmother's garden too, or this, I'd like to chop this tree up and use it as my Christmas tree, or I wonder how much it would be worth, the timber, if I cut, how much the timber would be worth. You're not really, the tree is a surface phenomenon when you're in that state of consciousness, a utilitarian surface phenomenon. You cannot sense the depth, the aliveness, the sacredness of the tree, and I'm only using tree as one of many possible examples. Life, really, the tree stands for life.
So welcome, or welcome back. And there's a chair here, which, as you may know, means it's time for one of our dialogues. And it's time for me to briefly incarnate as a talk show host. And I have to resist the temptation when I have dialogue partners, when they come on stage, say, welcome to the show. I have not had many scientists as dialogue partners. I had Peter Russell, who is not a scientist, but who has a good scientific background. But otherwise, I don't recall having... Well, I had a conversation with Deepak Chopra, who also has of course, a scientific background, but is not a scientist as such. And the reason may be that my science IQ is very low. It could be due to an undeveloped left brain, who knows. Not only that, I know that I never do well. Well, I only tried it once, to be honest. I don't do well in IQ tests. But my consolation is that IQ tests do not measure the whole spectrum of intelligence, but only a very small segment of intelligence. And basically, IQ tests are not how intelligent you are, but how good you are at IQ tests. So I have some books here. My guest today is a scientist, Lothar Schäfer, who was born in Germany, but has taught for, I believe, 40 years at the University of Arkansas as professor of physical chemistry. And about maybe a year ago or so, I received this book that he wrote not long ago, with a foreword by Deepak Chopra. And the title of the book is Infinite Potential. Infinite Potential. The subtitle is very interesting. It says, "What quantum physics reveals about how we should live." That's very intriguing, because nobody had thought of quantum physics as being able to reveal to us how we should live. So I get so many books sent every month, manuscripts, books, and it's not even possible to read them all, or even a few pages sometimes. So, and then when I travel, the books accumulate, and when I get back home, it's a huge pile. And my intention is always that eventually I will get to it, and of course then they pile up more and more, and that's one of my challenges. But for some reason, I don't know whether it was Deepak Chopra having written a foreword, I opened it and immediately responded, something within responded. And as I read, continued reading a few more pages, then I didn't start from the very beginning at first, but now, of course, I have read the whole book, even almost the whole book twice. But when I first looked at it, I didn't start from the very beginning, but somewhere a little bit into the book, and I came across a passage that I want to read to you in a minute that sounded so similar to what I often say in talks. And I know that that's not where he got it, so I didn't get it from him and he didn't get it from me, because when he wrote the book, he had never even heard of me. So then obviously it was something that is produced, like everything, by the one universal consciousness that came to a realization and expressed it in a similar way. And I'll read that to you in a minute. But before that, just one brief look at another book he wrote a few years ago. It has a very interesting title, In Search of Divine Reality, Science as a Source of Inspiration. Now, before you read this book, I think he would agree. I would highly recommend that you start with this book, because this is more challenging. It's a very erudite and scholarly examination. It's wonderful. My intention is to get my teeth into it this summer when I have plenty of spare time. So I'll be reading it, but I have opened it here and there, and it's wonderfully fascinating. And for those who are familiar with the German language, there's a German version of it. It's not exactly a translation, it's a reworking, it seems. And the title is somewhat different from the English title, Versteckte Wirklichkeit, which translates as Hidden Reality. And the subtitle is How Quantum Physics Can Lead Us to Transcendence. Now I'll read that this was one of the first things that jumped out of this book when I first opened it. So this is a little passage that I will read to you, and then I will invite Lothar up on stage. He addresses here the interconnectedness of seemingly separate things. You can think about this in the following way. If you've ever flown over an ocean or a large body of water, sometimes when the weather is right, you can see some white patches on the water below. Tiny white dots that suddenly appear like out of nothing, move around, one this way, one that way, and fade out of existence again. It is really a beautiful sight and a fascinating play of forms, and it is easily understood. The white patches are the crests of waves in the agitated ocean. Now, here's the interesting thing. You can't see these waves because you're too far up. You can only see the crests. But you have no doubt that the waves are there. You may even say that you know it. And if anybody tried to tell you that the white spots on the water were some sort of big white fish, you would not believe it. Furthermore, when you see how each of the patches is going its own way and couldn't care less about what the others are doing, you can't be fooled into thinking that the waves are isolated and independent appearances, because you just know that the waves in an ocean are not independent but conjoined in one giant movement of the whole. This is a useful experience because now when you look out into the world and see the things and people around you, you will not be fooled into thinking they are separate and independent appearances, because you know that they are the patches on the surface of an agitated ocean, the ocean of potentiality. In this non-material ocean, which seems alive and more mind-like than thing-like, the waves constantly build up to new empirical possibilities and perhaps even to new forms of thinking that may find consciousness in a human mind. After each transition from the possible to the factual, as one of the great pioneers of quantum physics, Werner Heisenberg, described it, the evolution of tendencies or possibilities for future actual events starts anew, but now from a different starting point than before, so that the universe is evolving. Physicist Hans-Peter Dürr, longtime co-worker of Heisenberg's, has called this a learning process. With the experiences that it makes through us, the cosmic potentiality is learning. It constantly manifests and reabsorbs. There is a continuous flux from the evolution of tendencies to their actualizations, empirical events, and from empirical events to new tendencies. Each new state of potentiality carries in it, like a stigma, the memory of the last state. You are a white crest on the surface of this ocean. So the one manifesting through you, thinking through you, perceiving through you, then going back within and then re-emerging. Wonderful image. Now the interesting thing is that Lothar Schäfer, our guest, did not arrive at this realization through going within, but examining matter and going so deep into matter where matter wasn't matter anymore. And he came to the same conclusion that mystics, or I myself, arrived at by going within. Very interesting. Now, I'm going to ask him in a minute how that happened, the process by which he arrived at that conclusion. So I'd like to welcome Lothar Schäfer. He will come up here in a minute. We don't have any music to play while he comes up to the stage. No, jump.
Is it on?
Yes.
Okay.
So, thank you for this wonderful book, and you told me that, or you wrote to me, sometime after this book came out, somebody mentioned my name to you, and then you said, who is that? Eckhart Tolle, never heard of him. But then you looked at a book and you saw certain similarities and you were surprised, and then I think you sent the book to me, or the publisher sent it, but with a letter written by you.
Well,
okay.
It doesn't sound likely, but I didn't know of you. Well, you hear names and so on, but I didn't know of you. And now I've nearly read all of your books, and I'm thinking, how does it happen? I mean, you have written things, and I can say before me, that I've written, but I didn't copy them. You get the strong feeling of a connectedness.
Yes.
And none that is under our control, but there is a mental background, a spiritual background, and if you open your mind, you have to open your mind, then you can be connected. And then also you can be connected with different minds and so on.
Yes.
This is in a way not classical science, because classical science was materialism.
And still is. This is materialism, right?
Yeah, the classical science. Classical science, in a way, has been found to be insufficient, but most scientists still are classical. Yes. They don't like the change.
Yes. So despite all these discoveries in quantum physics, the mainstream science is really still, the philosophical foundation is the classical science.
Yes, the business is still... So, you see, in the beginning, Newton, he said, God in the beginning formed matter in solid, massy, hard, impenetrable particles, so very hard as never to wear or break in pieces. Nature is lasting. It's materialism. The early French scientists, they said, there are two kinds of stuff, extended stuff and thinking stuff, but it had to be stuff. And it was, of course, a progress compared to the terrible things that happened in the spiritual world before that. It was a liberation, and it also led to development led to technology, all the things we have. I mean, they developed within this framework up to 1900. And then was the beginning of quantum physics. And quantum physics is a kind of idealism. It says that there is a part of the world that we cannot see, but it is real. But before that happened, physics became so successful, then it entered biology. And in the theory of evolution, having or not having stuff is the essence of life. If you don't get it, somebody else gets it. If he gets it, he eats you. No, you get it, you eat him. And it has often been said, but I think it is wrong, science has nothing to do with ethics. No, if this is what the world is like, then having or not having stuff and being aggressive is what you should be. That's a virtue. Mm-hmm. Somebody is a kind person, forget about him. He'll already be, be toast before he knows.
Survival of the fittest.
Survival of the fittest.
And that becomes an underlying assumption, philosophical assumption that spreads, and even people who know very little about Darwin or his theory, it seeps into everybody's mind, and as on the substratum of their minds, there is that mindset, that philosophy, and that in a way is still prevalent now.
And it is what we teach our children. It is what we teach in schools. Quantum physics says it is wrong. Why do we not teach quantum physics in high school? I don't know that it is conscious, but unconsciously, we don't want our children to know this. We want them to become good consumers, not spiritual minds. It's bad for business. Yeah. So, but quantum physics, quantum theory, also the extension to chemistry, quantum chemistry, is a sort of idealism, because it says that the basis of the world is not things, but its forms, non-material forms. If you, as science has done, pursue the nature of things, of matter, to the foundation, then all of a sudden you end up with elementary particles, molecules, electrons, and so on. And then, all of a sudden, something happens. When these things are particles, they have a certain mass and so on, it is constant. But when they are on their own, like in a vacuum, they're never completely alone, but in a vacuum there are much fewer interactions. When they do not interact, when you have an electron and it doesn't interact, it vanishes, it becomes a wave. That wave is extended in space, you can't see it. The thing leaves the empirical world. The wave doesn't have units of matter or energy, it's just a form. It's a pattern of information. Out of this form, the particle can jump out again. I'm not sure physicists know exactly where it gets the mass, maybe a Higgs field, and it doesn't matter. We can think that all material particles, all things are made of particles, all these particles came into existence like this. So the entire visible world is an emanation out of a realm of forms, ultimately. The forms have no units of mass or energy. They're just information. We don't see them. They appear to us as waves, so maybe we can think it's like an ocean. They're wave-like, but we don't really see. And that is also important, because it says there is a part of the world that is non-empirical. We cannot see it. Science cannot say anything about it. You don't know how mad scientists can get when I say something like, say, that guy, it's like a traitor.
Yes.
Because what does it say? It says there is a part of reality where science cannot enter. Science can deal with the empirical world, and it deals with this very well. You make experiments, you observe, you learn a lot. Then there is a part, the visible comes out of the non-visible. We can only guess or have, like blessed person like you have an inspiration. We can say it probably consists of something that we have to call forms. Maybe there are waves, and when there are waves, we think they're hanging together like waves in an ocean. It means the hidden reality is a wholeness. The forms are patterns of information, so you can think if there is information. Normally information is meant for a mind. Does it mean there's a cosmic mind?
Would you compare what you call the forms to what in the human beings, also something that you cannot see, thoughts? Are those the thoughts of the universe, those forms?
Now you can start thinking. I've sometimes said this way, in 1900, before the beginning of quantum physics, the age of classical physics, you could not believe in science, have a religious faith, and be logically consistent. At that age, it was stupid to believe in something. Now, I don't want to say it is not reasonable not to have a spiritual faith, but you can believe in science, in the order of the world, and have a spiritual conviction, and it is logically consistent. Nobody can tell you what you have to think. I mean, that's up to you.